Good morning. On the last day of the Art and Science Festival Grounded, with a very generic name that cannot evoke more ambivalent images and pose more diverse views than you can imagine, peace. First of all, many thanks to the organizers, especially to Barbara Neigel and her team for organizing this wonderful and timely festival. Good morning also to all of the audience in Pritličje, as well as the colleagues who are here with us online. Today's event is about transnational solidarity and support with social work educators from Ukraine, life experiences from the war time. I, Darja Zaviršek, will be speaking with my colleague, Professor Olga Shved, from the Department of Social Pedagogy and Social Work at Kiev Boris Grinchenko University. Although Olga and I have met over 40 times at Zoom meetings in the last year and a half, we have never seen each other in real life. War tears people apart, but it also brings some people together. It was our transnational initiative of solidarity and support for educators in social work that brought us together. When on February 24, 2022, the government of the Russian Federation carried out a military invasion of parts of Ukraine and launched an imperial war against the sovereign state, militarism and violence once again crept into our world. When war becomes a political order, people's lives are completely subsumed under it. We face forced mobilization, displacement, conscription of men, rape of women, growing poverty, hunger, fear, death, and depopulation. War determines the time of individuals and collectives. It is the organization of death, if I can recall the words of Achille Mbembe. The paradox is that the atavistic forms of collective violence are exercised today through the use of the most modern military equipment and technology for mass destruction. But we should remember that there was life before the war in Ukraine. Humans are more than war, wrote Nobel laureate Svetlana Alexievich. In February 2022, women activists were preparing for the Kiev March Zhenok, Women's March, scheduled for International Women's Day. They announced, I quote, "We demand the ratification of the Istanbul Convention. We are marching for women to make the state hear our voices and finally ratifies the Istanbul Convention. We have been waiting for a long time for the state to keep its promises." In 2020, we have collected more than 25,000 signatures in a petition demanding the ratification of the convention. End of quote. On February 22, I forwarded this information to my friend, Professor Oksana Boyko, head of the Department of Social Work at the National University of Kiev Mohyla Academy, saying that I was worried when I saw the gatherings of military troops on Russian-Ukrainian border at the same time. 4 days later, Oksana replied to me, "There will be no march on March 8th, as you may understand, because there is a full-scale war going on here." A few days later, some of us, and Shula Ramon, who is online too, and of course Olga Shved, our guest, some of us who have long been connected with Ukrainian social work colleagues, together with Eastern European Sub-Regional Association of School of Social Work, announced to start a solidarity and support meeting with social work educators and social workers from Ukraine. Since then, we have been meeting regularly, and today we have held 36 solidarity and support meetings. Social work educators from different Ukrainian social work departments meet with some renowned social work scholars from 11 countries around the world, including the members of International Association of the Schools of Social Work and European Association, all participated in these meetings. We became a collective international voice for people at war. We listened to the war stories of people on the ground and began to use the vocabulary of victims instead of aggressors, war instead of conflict, invasion instead of special military operation. We were reminded once again how important words are. Part of the normalization of war is talking about it in generalized terms. As Shaw has shown, speaking about colonialism in generalized terms is as offensive to survivors and their descendants as generalized talk about war is to those who experienced it. Ukrainian social work educators rejected a homogenized, generalized discourse of war and called for a thorough understanding of the concrete, specific war that they are living through. The Transnational Solidarity and Social Work initiative seeks not only to create a place for mutual learning, but also a place to express compassion and caring that are so important in the midst of the brutality of war. I was frozen since the beginning of the war. The solidarity meetings helped me thaw out, recalled one of the Ukrainian social work professors. We listened to personal stories and vignettes of the war, witnessing everyday Ukrainian life, dilemmas and fears, oppression and destruction. We asked our colleagues about immediate needs and tried to understand the individual stories. People living in war are often seen as an undifferentiated mass, like refugees from the Figura, to recall Primo Levi. We collected donations, and in times of propaganda and media manipulation, we wanted to get first-hand information and understand what is happening to people who are not usually the focus of public attention. People with disabilities, women who experience sexual violence, older people who live alone, students. We try to support people's needs for everyday normality in abnormal times. Sometimes we also have disputes that we have not yet resolved on anti-militarism, on involving social work academics from Russia who are against the war to our meetings. Half a year after the war, Halina Kruk, poet from Lviv, said, I quote, "The war creates the rift between those who have experienced it and those who are at a safe distance." How can this rift be overcome? I believe that we are able to overcome this gap, at least to some extent, by listening to each other and witnessing the war stories of those who live in the catastrophe of war. Olga Shved, who is with us today, told us a few months ago at one of our support and solidarity meetings, she said, "We are used to living with sirens. During our department meetings, which we held for 45 minutes, we continue the meeting despite the silence. This is normal. It's been like this for more than a year now," she said. Isn't this an act of bravery and strength, and a terrible reminder that war can be normalized and become part of our lives? Thank you, Olga, for being with us and to lessen the rift among those who live in war and those who are not. So I have a couple of questions, and my first question is, you were in Kiev when the war started. Did you have any idea that this might happen, and how do you remember the days when the war began?
Thank you for question. Thank you for inviting me. About the first day, no, the day maybe before, personally, I didn't believe either my daughter. A friend of my daughter's, who is a rich man, he called her 2 days before the war and said he is going with his family to Israel by private car and ready to take her family with her. And she was laughing at him, you know, she didn't believe. it's happened. I wake up at 5 in the morning because of 3 very serious explosions. I started check internet and I realized that the war started from Russian side. It was difficult to believe, because my mother is Russian. I not at 5 in the morning, but maybe after 7, I called to them, to my parents, and said that Putin started war, and they didn't believe. My parents said, "You're laughing at us. It is impossible." Yeah, but I called it to my daughter. She was she switched off her phone, and I reached her only at 8 maybe in the morning, 8:30 in the morning. And this time before 5:30 and 8:30, I was thinking what I can do in this situation. As many our people, I went to the bank machine outside to take cash, and it was long line. I stayed maybe for 40 minutes, and I got only 100 euro in Ukrainian currency, of course, because when people started to attack bank machine, they immediately made limit. But I was happy because some people didn't get any Ukrainian currency. Then we decided that I will go to my daughter's place because she has a parking lot, 2 floors, and it will be more safety. But it's interesting that we didn't expect, but in school where my granddaughters participate, they were prepared because these girls were taught at schools how to escape, where the bomb shelter was, and what they should have with them. Like even in their cabins, in school they have a blanket, water, cookies. It means that somebody already knows about this situation, but not ordinary people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course the situation was very difficult. My granddaughter, she had panic attack. She started cry. She had very high temperature, and we decided that Kiev is a dangerous place, and we decided to move outside of Kiev, but it was a big mistake. Unfortunately, we moved to a cottage village, very nice, with very fancy private buildings. But in 2 days, we were surrounded by Russian troops from 3 sides. And it was bombing around and above our heads, rockets and shells flew from different directions. In this village, we didn't have a bomb shelter. We just were sitting between 2 walls, but I'm not sure it will help because many private buildings around us were destroyed. But we were lucky to survive, as you can see me now. And in 3 days, we lost electricity, internet communication, phone communication, and water. We had lack of food. We tried to feed our girls, but not us. We had food to half a portion in the morning and in the evening time because we calculated that we cannot buy anything, and we don't have food in this house. In 7 days, we realized that there are some car movement in this village. And one person said that we have 1 hour to escape because Ukrainian army destroyed tanks and other Russian army equipment on the main road, and we have now one way to the main road to escape from this village. But new troops are coming from the side of Belarus, Belarus, I don't know how to say. Yeah, and in 10 minutes we were ready to escape, but on the way from this village to the nearest city, which was like maybe 70 or 80 kilometers from our village, we saw awful situation, burning civilian cars with burned body, burned tanks, other army equipment, many burned bodies. In order to protect our girls from this situation, my daughter covered them with a blanket. Yeah, because, you know, in our memory, in my daughter's memory, it's awful situation, but at least our girls, they didn't see it.
Yeah. Wow. I hope you will write down this, and that this is a terrible story of escape, and also how these terrible images stay with us, isn't it? And then also in the times of war, people's needs grow and resources diminish, as you say. And many services get closed, and social services were half closed, and professionals sometimes are faced with this ethical dilemma whether to care for their own families or to other people in need. So what were and what are the biggest challenges in terms of meeting people's needs in the early months of the war, and or with other words, what are the social problems in Ukraine related to the war that you can just point to them? I know we don't have enough time to be really comprehensive in this relation.
Of course, local authorities, they try to organize some evacuation or some services, but the problem was that ordinary people like social workers, medicians, people who work in for NGOs, they all have children, you know, elderly people, and many of them try to escape, to evacuate their families. And of course, we had lack of personnel who really worked with people in need. Of course, we have disabled and elderly and children everywhere. And as I know, local authorities try to organize evacuation, but very often it was lack of connection. In many cities, internet, phone communication, TV disappeared, and people, even they wanted to evacuate, to be evacuated, they didn't know where to go, where will be a bus or car which can take them. And there was another problem. Sometimes elderly people or family with children agreed to evacuate, but when buses or cars came, they said, no, we are not going because we have households with animals, we cannot leave them, and we will stay there. After very several bombings, they agreed. They called on I don't know, they informed that we are ready, but it was impossible to get there because it was really difficult bombing situation. And people faced a problem with nutrition in many regions. And thanks to volunteers and to National Police of Ukraine, they visited even bombed cities, distributed food, and they told me that people cried when they saw the bread. You know, sometimes people didn't see the bread during 1 month. It's difficult to believe that such rich agricultural country as Ukraine suffer from starvation. As you mentioned, really many services were destroyed. For example, for today, the last statistic were destroyed 330 hospitals, 44 social service centers, And elderly people, disabled people, they should return home or they should be evacuated in another city. And for them, it's also very big stress because they're accustomed to live in special places where they have special care. And many of them had problems, and even I know a couple of stories when people died because of this situation. They didn't accept this situation. By the way, my father also passed away because, you know, for them it was really big shock that the war started, because we have a lot of relatives in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, in many other cities in Russia. By the way, they didn't communicate with. They don't communicate with us. They stopped like 2 weeks after the war started. I don't know if they're afraid to communicate because very serious punishment will be for them, or they really believe that the Putin is going right things. You know, I don't know. And you know, maybe the next problem appeared when electricity was gone in Ukraine, and some elderly people or people who need medicine, they live on very high floors, rise buildings. Sometimes it's 8th floor, like me, or sometimes it's from 8th to 30th floor. You know, and there is no electricity, no elevator, and social workers or medical providers, they cannot walk to the 26th floor, you know, and also it was really a big problem. And very often only neighbors who were people who supported elderly or disabled people. Mm-hmm. Only neighbors. If they really had a good neighbors, it will be good situation for them.
Mm-hmm. Wow, and thank you, Olga, for sharing this tragic and sad stories with us. And despite the tragedies, you keep on going, and you are a professor of social work. And all of these months and a year and a half, you've been working without a break at the university. And you continued the work with the students. One of the social work professor last year, she said that she's afraid the students will not return to their studies because many of them left the country, or they went enrolled in studies in other countries, or they just disappeared where you cannot reach them due to the lack of electricity. And so what are your biggest concerns related to students and also your work, and how did you get the strength to go through all of that?
First of all, our university started education very soon in February, at the beginning of February. Even our students, they sent us emails that how it's possible to start. We are in a big depression now. We cannot think about education, but maybe it was a good decision because, you know, we recovered them from this depression. But, you know, due to COVID, thanks to COVID, our university has prepared for online education. We have all our courses on electronic system, lectures, seminars, and practice. And our university, for today, we didn't lose any student. Even some of them, they now stay in Canada and USA, and we have big time difference, but we try to help them according to their present situation. Some of them, they work, for example, in Germany, I know in Czech Republic, they work during the day. And of course, we understand the situation, and all of them, they involved in online studies during the day. They can learn lectures. Sometimes it's lectures we also record there in the morning time, for example, and they can see in the evening time this recording. And of course, they have a description for seminars and practice, what they should do, what's the task, how they should do it, where to find this information, what kind of answers we expected with them, what grade they can receive. You know, it's they all now convenient with this type of education. And since September, our university will start half and half education. Lectures will be online, but seminars and practice we will organize in auditoriums. But our university have several buildings, and all of them now have shelters. But the number of students is now very difficult. Our administration calculate how many students can stay in the building at the same time, because according to space of shelter, you know, because we cannot be stuff like this, to stay. It means that now they calculate how many, and the schedule calculated according to number of students. You know, as I remember the beginning of war, unfortunately, because of COVID, many students were at home in the occupied territories. And for many of them, it was very difficult and long way to leave this territory. And we organized a special social and psychological service at our faculty, and telephone numbers were placed on website, and students could address their problems. And our teachers worked with them for psychological rehabilitation, because many of them seen many explosions, deaths, and even rapes. Yeah, they reported to us about a very difficult situation. We helped.
Wow. So this is exactly what I wanted to ask you next, that as in all wars, women suffer sexual violence at the hands of soldiers and also girls. And this is also a lived experience in Ukraine. In May 20 last year, Lepa Mladenovic, who's also one of the speakers at the festival, Violca Krasnici, Lena Dominelli, and I gave a 2-day training for social workers on supporting girls and women who have been raped. So my question is, do women report rape, and what are the responses of the families and communities? So are women silenced due to stigma, what we know from other places in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, and so learned gendered behavior and non-supportive environment? So how, and also how can women in Ukraine be supported?
You know, I also search some statistic, and for April 2023, I found that the General Prosecutor Office of Ukraine records 175 official cases of sexual violence by occupiers, including 40 against men, 13 against children aged 4-17, but we don't know how many cases will be discovered after the occupation of all territory of Ukraine. And I can tell you about several shocking facts as we know now. When, for example, in Bucha, 25 young girls aged 14-25 were kept in basement and raped, and 9 of them now were pregnant. Unfortunately, many cases like that, and even former human rights ombudsman opened a special hotline, and in one interview she said that special hotline was opened for victims of sexual violence in March 2024, and more than 140 people contacted her as of my 24, you know, it means that during 3 months, there were more than 1,000 phone calls. People need help, or they ask it about their relatives or something like this. And even now we know about 500 suicides, and among these suicides are mothers whose children were raped in front of their eyes. Yeah, and they couldn't live with it. You know, it's a really difficult situation. You know, now I do some research, and I did many interviews. And what I can tell you about clients, form of sexual violence, what kind of sexual violence now in Ukraine exists. Rape, single, in presence of family members and group. Forced nudity. Women were horrified when they were not allowed to go out and change clothes during night arrest. It means that at night, Russians came to the apartment, and these women were forced to undress and dress in the presence of several soldiers. And at this time, they laughing, sometimes they filming, undressing, and very often they undressing in the nude, these women, forced to be naked, explaining that they could hide something on their bodies, and at the same time they filmed it. It's like they made some pornography. Also sexual harassment in the form of unwanted touching, hugging, and comments. For example, in corridor of the prison, the woman was approached by 15 soldiers, pulled up her t-shirt, touched her breast, looked into her pants, and promised gun rape. And another form, threats to commit acts of sexual nature, rape her, or rape her daughter. It's also some information. And how we discover this situation? No, first of all, national police, doctors and social workers in the territory liberated from the enemy are collecting possible information about death, about wounded, and who suffered from sexual violence perpetrated by the Russian aggressors. And they have some figures. Also, they sent, by the way, they sent immediately victims to special medical service or to psychological service. Also, partner organization, they inform us, and especially if they don't know how to help, how to communicate, and they redirect to specialists, but they inform us that we have some clients. Also, we have special points of invincibility, and women came to these special places, and they can get information where to apply in case of sexual violence. Also, some people try to recommend them how to go and where to apply. Hotlines, we have special hotlines, at least I know 3 of them, running by NGOs, which helped them, but only in form of phone consultation. Hub online, a Safe Woman Hub we have. It's also possibility to communicate by emails, by phone, by different possible communication form, Viber, etc. Police, 102, we have for everyone now this phone number they can call. And of course, we receive some clients which come to social services to talk about these problems, not these problems, about their problems, but we can recognize, like after 2 or 4 consultations, they can say what happened to them. Not immediately, but if they believe that this person is good for them to communicate, to open the case, they can say. Sometimes women talked about feeling unwell, and then the reason was found out. Yeah. Also, talking with client, especially when she is in a state of acute stress, if it's happened like less than 2 months ago, specialists can discover the situation. Also, for example, some of them can say, I don't have no appetite, or does not, or she does not remember when she ate. It means that something very serious happened to her, and then specialists can discover the situation. And from you know, sometimes children can tell what happened to her or his mother. How we discover.
Okay. Yeah, it's so important to talk about that, and also to get sensitized, as Leva Mladenovic would say, the rape during the war is a continuation of sexual violence against women in the peacetime. But also many women have joined the military. And according to some reports, there are over 42,000 women in various military units in Ukraine. Does this surprise you, given the traditional images of women women are not seen as a woman with a gun in a traditional imagery?
To be honest, if I were younger, I would have joined the army too. But unfortunately, I'm more than 60. You know, because home security is not only a man's business, it's also a woman's business, and gender equality exists in Ukraine. We have the same age for pension. We have quite big control now for competition for a job. And even salary competition is, we have special administration who try to check the equality of women and men. It's why women also can join the army. But many of them, they not use a gun. They serve as at the army as combat medics or paramedics. I know many of them, and I personally collected clothes for paramedics who asked for T-shirts because they explain that there is no time to wash and clean. Yeah, they just throw it away after work, after very difficult work, and they said there are a lot of unfortunately a lot of work and no time for rest, to wash, to take a shower even. And what to add?
Okay. Yeah, so we will see what the women will tell when they come back, and whether they how also the society will look at them, and but it's certainly important to show the agency, and it was a surprise for many people. But currently, also the number of men who don't want to serve in the army is growing. And the government is pursuing tougher policies to make sure that men enter the military units. Some men express conscientious objection, the right to refuse to kill. So how do you see this development in the midst of war?
Of course, nobody wants to die. But among the people I know, everyone said that if I get a summons, it's mean order to go to army, I will go. It means that anyway people will go. But of course, if some people refuse to kill, they can serve in army at other position like mechanics or to build fortification or to be paramedic or to deliver food or equipment. You know, there are a lot of jobs which don't use a gun. It's not a secret that many men escape abroad, especially the first days where there was no special order to close the border. But I don't know about their returning to Ukraine. I think people will have special attitude to them. It will be difficult for them to find a good job. I think so. Yeah, because now many people discuss that some people protect Ukraine and some people decided to see what happened next. You know, of course, it will be not the same position for this man.
Yeah. Yeah. So you are a social work scholar, and you know, you are very much aware that war exacerbates social inequalities that existed before the war. So if we look at children, children are often also used as weapons by the aggressor. So how do children survive and respond to war?
Mm-hmm. First of all, I would like to say that children were used by Russian army not only as a weapon, but also as a protection from the fire. They put children into the army cars. As I remember when they escaped from Kiev region to avoid bombing. You know, they know that Ukrainians will not bomb children. And also Russians, they kidnapped children from Ukrainian parts, from orphanages, from hospitals, from sanatoriums, and from parents. They divided families. And at the moment, we calculated the amount 700,000 children stay in Russia. For today, I got information only 61 returned home from 700,000. You know, it means that we still have a lot of Ukrainian children there. As for Ukrainian children who stay in Ukraine, of course, for them, it's very important to have parents nearby. Because, you know, I remember the situation with my granddaughters. We stayed and we, even my granddaughters cried and tell us they kill us, but we said, just sit and we will sing songs. We draw nice pictures, we tell positive stories, we even try to laugh, you know. It means that it will be very good atmosphere between all these family members. For them, it's very important. But now children accustomed live under sirens and accustomed to go to bomb shelters, to sit between two walls. But I'm worried about winter time. Winter is coming and it will be again problem with electricity and shelters. Our shelters are quite cold, you know, to sit there. It's very cold. And even I remember we had warm clothes, but anyway, in 1 hour it will be very cold, and many children, they got temperature because of shelters. Yeah, it's difficult, especially, of course, everyone is worried about their children, how they will survive, about their future. Because like I remember when I'm not very religious person, but I remember when there was very serious bombing, I started to pray to the God and said that I'm okay, I'm more than 60, but please save my daughter and my grandchildren. Yeah, of course, it's our future, and we are very worried about them.
Yeah. And the war continues. Actually, for some people, there is less resilience. People are more traumatized and more, and also there are less resources. And there is, you saw one winter, so you can expect the next winter, and it is really, really worrying. So in order to leave some time for discussion, I would just like to ask you the last question, and very briefly. So as a social work scholar, what would you say, what are the challenges that await social workers after the war?
Mm-hmm. We already have a lot of challenges, and we will have after war. It's, as I told you, as I mentioned you before, many social services destroyed. People need place to live because now at the moment we have Russian ruins, about 18,000 high-rise buildings and more about 40,000 private buildings. We had only internally displaced people about 7 million. It means that they need place to live, and they ask how we can help social workers. They need job. Also, we try to help them. Psychological rehabilitation. Many people still in depression, and they even try to make suicide. They call to social workers. I don't want to live. You know, families who lost members of family during the war. It's a trauma for them. Orphan children. I know personally a boy, 12 years old, whose mother first was in army, and she was killed, and then father, and now he is alone. Also, problems, we will have problems with soldiers returning from war with post-traumatic stress. It's also will be a big field of work. As I know from the war which started, by the way, in 2014, many people who return from the situation of real war, they addicted to alcohol or even drugs, and its addiction is also influence to family, and domestic violence increase. It means that we will have a lot of problems also. We'll see, but at the moment, yeah, we have also problem how to help elderly people, disabled people, because if it was more or less developed before the war, special cars, special education for children, disabled children, but now many such settings destroyed. And we will start from the zero.
Yeah, so the needs of people just get just are becoming enormous, isn't it? So Olga, thank you so much for sharing with us your personal stories and experiences, and your experiences as social work scholar and professor.